Good afternoon or good morning in the United States. I'm Kelly Alley, and I'm a professor of anthropology at Auburn University. And I was a member of the environment panel at the Pan-Asian Connectivity Conference. And what I would like to do is just summarize what my colleagues presented briefly, and then I'll just go through some of my slides and end by showing a new website that we've created of hydropower projects across the Himalayas. We were in charge of addressing environmental issues, but all of us focused on water, and that's of course because there are so many rivers descending off of the Tibetan Plateau, and the northeast into Myanmar and other parts of Southeast Asia all derive most of their water, surface water resources from the rivers that descend from the Tibetan Plateau. So, you know, there are critical issues around water supply, water pollution, and now also energy generation from these rivers that need to be addressed. Another issue that we all kind of focused on to varying degrees is the phenomenon of hydropower development across the steep drops of the Himalayas in all of these river basins. So I will refer to some of these themes when I'm just summarizing their presentations briefly, and then I'll also come back to it and show some of my slides. So the first speaker was Rohan D'Souza, and he did kind of a conceptual framing of modern notions of water, just to loosen up, I think, our brains and get us to think about water in different ways. And this is important, of course, because historically water has been valued in religious frameworks and has been very important to the way people think about meanings of water, apart from the uses that they have of water. So he gave us three frameworks in which water is explained. First, he talked kind of about the technocratic view of water and the notion that in the technocratic view, water is generally considered neutral, and it is simply something that you manipulate in order to do other things, like generate energy or use water for various types of industrial processes, or even use channel water through canals for irrigation. Another view of water that he talked about is what he called sort of the local meanings approach, and in that we would find, for example, in the Ganga and Brahmaputra river basins in India, ample evidence of how people view water in a sacred sense and have very heartfelt connections as a result of those views of water. He also contrasted kind of a chart that showed kind of a grid-like nature of how you would portray water in a technocratic approach with a fluvial map of what the Brahmaputra basin looks like, because the Brahmaputra basin is actually one of the few that's not completely dammed and doesn't have a lot of waterways that are diverted. So it's really a beautiful, natural flowing river. It is you know, a river that expands greatly during the monsoon. It's a braided river. If you look at it from the if you're flying overhead and landing in Assam, you can see that braided nature very well. So he kind of showed that map as well, just to get us to think about how rivers actually behave without human intervention. Then third, he talked about the frame of securitization, in which water is considered as something which could become scarce, and therefore conflicts arise around uses and control of water. Within that framework, you also have enforced secrecy about water, so for example the classification of data and any other kind of information that could be used to leverage water sharing agreements. And this is a huge problem within all of the basins that descend off the Tibetan Plateau, because they are transnational and there's very little flow data available in the public domain on those rivers, and it frustrates scientists greatly because they're unable to create hydrological and climate models without robust data sets. So when you have that kind of a securitization framework at play, then the data is not going to be shared, and you're going to come up with all kinds of issues that are going to impact the extent to which you can predict disasters arising from climate change. So in this context, he argued that we need dialogues across the spectrum, and especially we need to include people in discussions about what water means. And several people mentioned this during our panel, that what we need is a lot of dialogue in order to share values and meanings. You know, it's not just about providing water to people or generating electricity. It's about keeping other kind of life ways included in these discussions about what an entire river basin means. Doug Hill then talked about, he did sort of the broad sweep of hydropower projects across South and Southeast Asia. And he pointed out that many hydropower projects, since they are the largest kind of water-using sets of infrastructures in this area, many of them lack legitimacy among local populations due to the way projects are carried out. There are, again, problems of lack of data. There's also just a general lack of weather stations. For example, ICI-MOD, which is a really good science-based organization in Nepal, just has a handful of weather stations to deal with, and all of these river systems that are flowing from the Tibetan Plateau through Nepal, also up through the northwestern side of India and Pakistan, and into the South and Southeast Asian region that we were looking at. There are also hotspots of biodiversity that are not cataloged, and we don't have a complex and full understanding of what is available that we might be losing. So he did a good job of kind of taking us through some of those issues. He also argued for multi-track dialogue that can reduce the trust deficit between countries in water sharing negotiations and treaties and agreements. He also said that we need to think about ecosystem services, about all of the ways that humans survive off of the river system that are not directly related, for example, to irrigation or hydropower. Ecosystem services are also things that rivers do for other parts of the ecosystem that are then beneficial for humans, such as feeding forest systems, feeding fisheries, and all of the other biodiversity that we use for pharmaceuticals and everyday consumption. So therefore we need a mix of security. Well, he said that we need a mix of energy securities, but really we need a mix of all different kinds of water securities. Then finally, Jayanta Bandyopadhyay summarized up our papers, and he just has a wealth of experience in the study of water resources, so it was just valuable for us to listen to his perspective. And he started out by saying that connectivity is not mechanical, that it's a human felt issue, and we need to get back again to this notion of creating an ongoing dialogue between peoples in the region, since there's a lot of ethnic diversity, and we need to start building these trust bridges between groups. He also said that states should not hide from the eco-fragility of the region. There's a big debate in the northwestern Himalayas about whether or not we should establish an eco-sensitive or eco-fragile region in the upper reaches of the Ganga Basin. There is one there now, which prevents development and dam building, but people are trying to dismantle it, and then some people are trying to reinforce it through the courts. So that's an ongoing issue. We have to value eco-fragility and then figure out how we can build in areas that are not sensitive to that ecology and the hydrological system. He also talked a lot about the need for good science, especially in environmental impact assessments. These need to be peer reviewed in a critical process. In my paper, I wrote about the political manipulation of environmental impact assessments, and that has a lot of implications for the safety of not only human populations, but the infrastructure that is so important to everybody, and hydropower projects in particular. So we need proper scientific knowledge and institutional involvement. We have to get out of the administrative paradigm that's now controlling these EIA processes. For example, one of the EIAs that were produced for 3 new hydropower projects that were just cleared in the Upper Siang Basin in Arunachal Pradesh were produced by a department at Delhi University that was appointed by the Power Ministry. So there's an essential conflict of interest there that could, be problematic for safety and fully understanding the impact of these infrastructures. We need to have a robust database, as I mentioned earlier, for Himalayan rivers in order to generate climatic and hydrological models that are so important to predicting our long-term water sustainability in the region. Even China and India can cooperate on climatic and hydrological modeling. A lot of our conference had to do with, we really didn't talk about cooperation between China and India, but in this area it's absolutely critical because they both share the rivers of the Tibetan Plateau. And not only India, of course, but Myanmar and into other parts of Laos and Thailand and Vietnam, all the countries downstream, or all the downstream riparians. Okay, so just a few of my slides. I talked about hydropower governance, but really the main impression you could get out of it is that it's a very busy field, and that's why we're all obsessed with hydropower right now. I think there are certainly other water issues. The Subramanian report just came out in November and advocated for a restructuring of environmental governance in India. It's a very controversial report. It's not clear whether it will be implemented, but the Minister of Environment and Forest just recently announced that within 2 months he is going to propose a new bill in the Lok Sabha, which will restructure the clearance process for infrastructure projects. So we don't know if they're going to really rely upon the Subramanian report and make some further modifications. But definitely the interest right now is to expedite forest and environment clearances for projects, because a lot of things have been held up in the Environment Ministry for a long time. But part of the reason things are held up is because there are problems with the project designs and also from the siting of projects in particular locations. So citizens are always active in monitoring, and in fact that's how I got involved in all of this in the first place, is by looking at citizen activism on the ground, through religious activities and rituals, but also through this very unique system of public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. So this activist work is absolutely amazing, and the extent to which people will use their personal funds and energy in order to try to figure out better ways to get citizen input is admirable. The Himalayas, as I already mentioned, is an important region. It's anticipated that with the warming climate, you'll have increased glacial melt. So people are trying to measure out what that would mean for river systems over time, but you need robust databases in order to do that. Also, we need better monitoring through citizen organizations and also through science groups to understand how river flows behave during extreme rainfall events when they're channeled through tunnels that generate power for projects, but also as they're channeled for irrigation and other human uses. The extreme rain events that occurred in 2013 in Kedarnath was a very kind of sad reminder of how the conjunction of weather systems can produce such extreme rainfalls that they also provoke glacial lake outbursts. And that's exactly what happened here, and the whole town was submerged. So this should be a wake-up call to everybody. There was a lot of damage to hydropower projects up in Uttarakhand from the 2013 flood. So after that, the Supreme Court asked expert bodies to sort of look into that and assess the extent to which the hydropower projects had a role to play in shaping how the flood occurred, since it's not just the result of precipitation. So I did a paper on muck and debris sites in the Srinagar Dam and looked at how this is what the muck sites looked like before the flood. And then after the flood, they were all eroded and washed into the riverbed, and then all the silt and clay and stuff was dumped downstream on properties of residents in the city. So you can see the erosion here. If you look closely enough, the extreme erosion on the riverbank, that used to be a big muck sandbank. But the problem here is that this was actually a case in the National Green Tribunal, and the company was ordered to remove the muck sites from the riverbank, and they didn't comply fully. So we come back to this issue of regulation and compliance as being critical to how we can protect communities if we're going to be involved in this kind of hydropower development. So finally, we just have a lot of maps of hydropower projects. I talked about the Subansiri Dam and the Dibang Dam. I won't get into that, but I just want to go ahead here to some of these maps because we think that it's sort of helpful to have all of this online so people can keep track of where dams are located. The Pok, Hio, and Tato 1 dams were just cleared, and they are the ones that are on the Indian side of the line of actual control with bordering China. So, and China had already built, you can see on this map, you can see on the upstream side, they have 4 dams under construction. 1 is completed and 3 under construction. So on the Indian side, they also kind of matched that with 3 by clearing 3 projects. So these are all new. We don't know yet what impact they'd have on flows downstream. If you go to the dams of the Himalayas section, well, you go to interactive map and then dams, then you can move using the cursor. You can move around. See, you can move around the map, and then you can click on a particular dot, and you get a pop-up box with information, the name of the dam, the output status, and company. And then, in addition to that, you can go to the query section, and you'd have a full spreadsheet of information on all of the dams, including links to media reports and also scientific documents related to that dam. So this is all to just assist the public in understanding what's out there, what are the stages of hydropower development, and then how might those projects impact their community.